All right, so in terms of kind of describing them, these are some varied ways that people will often try and define advanced learners. So it could be just because of the level that they're in at school, okay? In my time, I've worked in private English language schools in particular, where the advanced students were actually intermediate. It's just they were the strongest students in the school, basically. So, the term already begins to get a little bit kind of slippery and difficult, because actually they were advanced only in that context. So that can be one issue. With the CEFR, and we've got these kind of descriptors at C1 and C2 level, that actually helps a little bit, being able to sort of look at those descriptors and think, okay, can the learner behave linguistically? Does their competence equal those descriptors? So that can be one way of defining it. It can be because they have passed an exam like Cambridge Advanced, which is kind of like a rubber stamp. You know, you've passed this exam, that means, you know, you're at advanced level. Or something like IELTS. In New Zealand, IELTS is quite popular because a lot of people want to study at university. And so if students are getting IELTS 7, 7.5, that's usually advanced. Usually, in some contexts, it could be 6.5. Yeah, okay. There's a bit of variation there. But another way of actually looking at advanced learners is actually like taking a real world perspective and looking at how students can operate in a specific sort of professional context. Okay, I mean, they could be business people, and you know that they can function very successfully and communicate very easily in written and spoken language in, say, an office environment or maybe a medical environment or something along those ways. So their work context, professional context, could be another way of defining advanced. Yeah. So we've got these things like descriptors, exams, which are maybe a little bit more objective, but these other contextual ways of describing advanced learners. So there's quite a bit of variation, yeah, and it's actually quite difficult to pin down sometimes. This is a quote from Alan Maley, where he says, unfortunately there's no generally agreed definition of what advanced means, and it seemed best to adopt a family resemblance approach. Okay, they kind of look like an advanced learner, they kind of behave like an advanced learner, whereby advanced learners might share some, but not all characteristics, which is quite nice, because I think that you probably will have perceived with advanced learners that there's some, you know, advanced learners are sometimes stronger in some skills than they are in others. Like some are better at speaking and listening, others are maybe better at reading and writing, or some have got very good grammar knowledge, but are maybe not as communicative as we would want them to be. But certainly in terms of their vocabulary and grammar knowledge, they are advanced. So this kind of sharing some, but maybe not all the characteristics. So the problem is that, when students are at a low level, their needs are so kind of obvious in a way. You know, they've got so much to learn. But the higher students go up in level, the more they begin to have these kind of what I would call jagged profiles, yeah, where they're not consistent because they've been learning English for a long time and they really have begun to develop different strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so this is how I sort of operate, that I think advanced, you know, the definition of advanced can be looked at in quite a variety of ways, and it's not easy to have a really perfect, clear, sharp definition of what an advanced learner is. So with this in mind, I decided I wanted to find out a bit more about advanced learners. So I decided to carry out a kind of a case study with students at my school. And I quite deliberately chose a class that I was not teaching at the time, because I felt that in terms of getting them to kind of talk openly, because I wanted to find out a little bit about how they felt about methodology and materials and all sorts of things. And I thought, if I'm their teacher, they won't probably answer honestly. Okay, so I actually chose another class that a colleague of mine, Pauline, was teaching, and I I worked through her and did sort of follow-up questionnaires and interviews with them. So I also wanted to look at it from the point of view of what learners perceived and also from what teachers perceived. Okay, so I wanted to look at kind of what learners were thinking about themselves, but what teachers in my school were thinking about themselves. So I gave out 12 questionnaires, okay, and of course I got 5 replies. So the first thing to say is that my case study is very small. Okay, it is very, very small, all right? But it was interesting nonetheless. It was interesting nonetheless. Okay, and I followed up with that group of 5 students. I did 2 kind of group interviews. So on the basis of the questionnaires, I did follow-up group interviews where I got them to tease out things, ask them more questions. We did one group of interviews, and I analysed that data, and then I went back to them and talked to them again. Okay, so I got that sort of data. Likewise, the teachers, 15 questionnaires, 5 replies. Yeah, okay, all right. Motivated teachers. And likewise with them, I did 2 workshops, okay, where I followed up. So I looked at what the comments had made. I mean, with the workshops, I actually included teachers who hadn't actually necessarily filled the questionnaires, okay. So because I was kind of interested in getting as much information as possible. So, I mean, you can see, this is a simple case study. It's not highly scientific, it's not rigorous, but I was more interested in, what information I was going to get. And this is what I wanted to find out. I wanted to know how they would define advanced. So the very same question. So I was interested to see how students defined themselves and what teachers at my school had to say. I was interested in their skill needs, okay? I was interested in their language needs, and I was interested in what resources and methodology they thought to be effective. Those were the kind of the key questions that I wanted to answer. The learners who I worked with, they were in a general English class. We have, at my school, we have 8 levels. The 8th level is kind of proficiency, Cambridge proficiency or post-proficiency. It's kind of a C2 level. And these guys were at a C1 level, okay, where it was general English, but if they wanted to say, for example, do a Cambridge exam, they were all at a good level to start studying for Cambridge Advanced, for example. If not that they didn't do that, but they could have if they wanted to. I had a nice balance of gender, 3 women, 2 men. Okay, all right. And I also had I had 5 different nationalities, so I was very pleased about that. The 5 students who did reply, they weren't all Swiss, which is a high possibility. Yeah, okay. So 1 Brazilian student, 1 German student, a Korean student, a Swiss-Italian student, and a Thai student. So I got quite a nice and these kind of nationalities are sort of typical of the nationalities we often get at my school, particularly at an advanced level. Okay. The teachers who responded, they all had 5 years experience or more. So they weren't recently trained teachers, and they really had taught all levels. Okay, there's no level that they hadn't taught, so they had a good understanding of kind of how levels worked. And they'd also done a lot of them had done specialist classes like business English, English for academic purposes, these kinds of ESP type classes. So the teachers had a good range of experience. Okay, they'd also done like Cambridge exam classes as well. So the first question, how can you define an advanced learner? And here's some example answers from the learners themselves. Just one thing to point out, their answers have got grammar inaccuracies in them. And I've actually just left those inaccuracies. I haven't cleaned up their language, okay? So that's deliberate, all right? Okay? I haven't tidied up their language, okay? So first one, I can use a bigger range of vocabulary, that or than. I can write most sentences without doing mistakes. Certainly a little bit ironic. That first comment, that first one. Okay. When you can speak and write full sentences and be clear with your ideas, it means I'm able to use the language with more easiness and variation. Advanced means the ability to using English without nervous. Okay? Okay, so these are some of their answers. Here are some of the teachers' answers. They can keep a conversation going with ease, discussing a range of topics. Inaccurate use of verb forms for the given context. Okay? So already the teachers are focusing more on inaccurate rather than accurate language. Their written and spoken language will contain some infelicities that errors. Okay? Are able to get their ideas across but lack accuracy. Okay? So in fact, some of the similar comments that you guys made, yeah, not that distant at all. Yeah. So that's interesting. So there were a lot of comments that they wrote. So what I did is I looked at them and I tried to look at them. So I came up with these 5 categories that the comments really kind of fitted into, looking across both the teachers and the learners' comments. Okay. So one major area of discussion obviously was language accuracy, whether advanced learners are accurate or not. That was a common theme, okay, in the comments. Another theme was clarity of expression, this idea that advanced learners can express themselves clearly or not. Communicative ability, in other words, this idea that advanced learners can communicate, even if they're not always accurate, they can always get their ideas across. Fluency and ease, that was a common topic. So how comfortable the learners felt in terms of communicating and how fluent they were, okay? And then range of language. Okay, what was their grammatical and lexical range? Was it extensive or narrow? Okay, so just to give you kind of a few examples of how I did this. So looking at these examples we already have, I've tagged this one as being about range and accuracy. Okay. The second comment is about clarity and accuracy. The third comment I tagged fluency and ease. So these are just a few examples. So obviously there was a lot more data. Because they actually wrote quite a lot. Both the teachers, the ones who did contributed really well, which was great. So I actually had quite a bit of information to work with. A couple of more examples. Inaccurate use of verb forms, so accuracy, are able to get their ideas across but lack accuracy, communicative ability, accuracy. Okay. So, this is the first of kind of a few prediction exercises that I'm going to, it's basically a guessing game, and don't worry about being right or wrong, because you are literally guessing. Okay. So, what I'd like you to do is look at these 4 categories: fluency and ease, clarity and accuracy, range, communicative ability. So which definitions do you think were suggested by teachers only, by students only, or by both? Okay, so what I'd like you to do is talk together and see if you can guess which of these were either both or only teachers or only students. So have a chat together. What do you think? So what's interesting about this is, okay, in terms of fluency and ease and communicative ability, that's where the kind of teachers are focused in terms of thinking that, advanced learners are they're good, they're fluent, they're communicative. But in terms of range and accuracy, in a positive way, the learners, that's where the learners felt that advanced learners had good range and accuracy. So that's how they saw themselves. So what's interesting about this is that the teachers are a little bit negative about the learner's ability to actually be accurate and have good range, a good range of language. Okay, which is interesting. Okay. So in fact, I was curious about that. So I actually asked the teachers in the workshop, and I sort of said, so you guys came across as more negative in terms of accuracy and range. why do you think that's the case? And this is what they said. I recorded them in the workshop. And they said, these are 2 example comments. We think of particular examples of learners with so many different needs, so we don't automatically think about accuracy and range. Okay? So the teachers are sort of, saying that when we're thinking about advanced learners, we're more focused on their needs. Yeah? So, and we see that they need more accuracy, a greater range of language. And then the second comment, when we think about the gap between advanced students who teach with native speakers, it's quite a wide gap. But the interesting thing about this comment is this teacher here is not a native speaker. She's Brazilian. Okay, we have a Melissa, Brazilian teacher at our school. So this was her comment, because I suspect the native speakers were perhaps not dared to say that. I don't know, but yeah. But it was interesting that someone who was a non-native speaker teacher made that observation. Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting. This idea of the gap between where advanced learners are and where kind of really native speakers or highly fluent speakers of English are, but also this idea of being focused on learner needs. Okay, may account for the slightly negative view. Okay, so another prediction activity. This time we're looking at skills. And what I'd like you to do is predict the language skill needs as indicated by both learners and teachers. So looking at listening, speaking, reading, writing, can you together try and rank them? So what did the learners think was the least important thing, the lowest need, relative to the greatest need, which of the 4 skills? So rank them like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So do it for learners, and then think about it from the teacher's perspective. Okay? So again, have a guess. Have a guess what they might have said. Okay, so please bear in mind this is only students in my content. So okay, so I'm sharing this information with you. What is interesting is that writing came across as the greatest need. One interesting thing is, of the 5 learners, 3 of them had jobs in their home countries where they needed to write a lot. In a professional situation. They needed to write reports, do email, that kind of thing. Okay. And I think the teachers often are kind of quite exam focused. They immediately think of like IELTS or Cambridge Advanced. And again, writing is quite an important need there. There is this, what is interesting, I'm going to look at it in a minute, it's the disparity between speaking. I think that's quite interesting, so I'm going to comment on that in a minute. But before we do that, let's just see what both the learners and the teachers said about writing, why it was because again, I went back and asked them in the interview, so why did you put writing? Why is that most important? And this is what the learners said. I think that writing is the last skill you really master, because writing you need to be completely secure about the grammar, the vocabulary, collocations, idioms, that sort of thing. And then another of the students said you can't correct yourself, you can't go back like speaking. You need to be very, very clear. Yeah. Okay, because basically once you've written it and sent it, that's it. Yeah. Yeah, and then they had more time, yeah. Yes and no. I mean, one of the things, this has nothing to do with this particular thing, but there's another session that I do on writing skills, and one of my theories is that these days students do far more writing than they ever used to do because of information technology. And a lot of that writing, like tweeting, WhatsApp, that kind of thing, they don't actually stop and think anymore. So that the students are actually writing a lot more these days under time pressure. Yeah. So I actually think writing skills have become more important than they used to be. Which is why in Empower, we've got writing in every unit, basically. Because students actually need more support with writing, because information technology is putting that demand on them, yeah, in that way. And a lot of it is instantaneous. It's kind of, a tweet. It's gone. Yeah. Okay, teachers, this is what, I mean, I think the teachers were quite exam focused in their comments. It's the C word, meaning complexity. Yeah, okay, right, not anything else. So, yeah, it's this idea that writing does often need to be, particularly if you're doing like essays, that kind of thing, it often needs to be more sophisticated, IELTS exam questions, etc. In terms of different knowing awareness of different genre types and the kind of language that might be used. And then also things like logical referencing, topic sentence, supporting sentence, not just random. So here, the teacher's very focused on coherence, okay, coherence in writing, and understanding what you're trying to communicate, and then how can you logically create a text to do that. The other issue, perhaps it's worth pointing out, is obviously in New Zealand we do have a lot more learners from countries like China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, okay? And they often struggle a little bit more in terms of writing skills because their kind of discourse conventions are so very, very different, okay? So that is one factor. I mean, a lot of writing that they do is grammatically correct, but you're reading it, particularly Chinese learners, and you're saying, what point are they trying to make here? And it's kind of, sort of goes, and it's not actually a grammar problem, it's a discourse problem. Yeah, okay, of trying to kind of put their ideas in a logical way. So I think that, you know, the teachers' comments here probably reflect that. So this disparity in the speaking needs, so I actually found that really interesting. And what I think could be going on there is that the teachers see that speaking is of less importance because they perceive as speaking as just being communicative ability, to get your ideas across, to communicate, to speak fluently, and not always accurately. However, the learners, on the other hand, feel that speaking, when they think about speaking, they're actually thinking about things like pronunciation, style, so are they using the right level of formality? Are they using the right register, like, you know, legal language versus health language, because at this higher level, learners are more aware of these subtleties in language use, particularly style and register. And this came through in their comments, in fact. So I think that it's interesting that learners see speaking as being more about language, okay? Whereas teachers, the teachers here perceive speaking as being more about ability just to communicate, to get your ideas across. So that's why they ranked it as not being as important, and but the learners rank it as number 3. Okay, obviously, if you can't pronounce things clearly, if you haven't got a good understanding of style and register, that does affect your ability to communicate orally, effectively. Yeah. Okay. So we now move on to language systems, so phonology, vocabulary, grammar. Here, let's just look at the learners, okay? Another prediction kind of game. Think of it as a game, not a task. Okay. So I got them to think about language in 2 ways, okay? Their knowledge of language, what they actually know about grammar, what they know about pronunciation, what they know about, as opposed to their ability to actually use it. Yeah, because I mean, learners can often just spout grammar rules. They know a lot. Some learners can anyway, can just spout grammar rules. But when they actually, you know, try and put it into practice, it's not so good. So again, I got them to rank. They felt that they knew a lot about phonology, or they can use it, so they need to develop their knowledge, or the other one, the ability to use, they can use the system well, they need to develop their ability. Okay? So, using A and B, those 2 categories, rank them 1, 2, 3, okay, for the 3 systems. Have a go, have a guess. See what you think. Okay, so this was the learners only, remember. And what's interesting is there's actually a clear correlation between what they felt they knew about the language system and how confident they felt in their ability to actually use it. Okay, so grammar was the one thing that they actually felt most comfortable with. The thing that they felt they knew less about was pronunciation, and also they felt they also were worried about their ability to actually pronounce well. Okay, so that was quite interesting. Compare that with the teachers. So what the teachers did, they said they thought that the learners probably didn't know much about pronunciation, but they felt that their pronunciation was actually not that bad. Okay, all right. And they put vocabulary and grammar in terms of ability to use to that in terms of scoring. So the thing that's different there is basically going. If I go back, this is kind of this is the thing that I found actually quite interesting, because it's often not something I associate with advanced learners a lot. Pronunciation, this kind of ability or need to be able to use it well. So, okay, they had different views. Teachers perhaps believe lack of knowledge doesn't greatly affect learners' ability to use the system. Learners feel lack of knowledge raises doubts about their ability to use phonology effectively. So I asked them what it was about phonology that they found difficult. And I thought it might have been sounds, but no, it was stress and intonation. Yeah, that they felt was the biggest challenge for them. And this is just one example comment. You need to be completely correct with stress and tones. I know that makes a difference for native speakers, but maybe we don't notice it. Okay, so it was stress and intonation where they felt that they needed, where they felt most insecure. They don't really understand how it works, and they don't feel that their ability to use it is at a high level at all. I also I was curious about this because I was, because at advanced level is the issue about having an accent in English, and so I thought, and that wasn't on the questionnaire, but I was just kind of curious to find out about that, and I asked them. And one student said, I've always been chasing to sound like a native speaker. I agree with you about identity. So I'd asked them whether, if they lost their accent, if they actually had a New Zealand accent or a British accent, would that mean that they felt they no longer had an identity as a Korean or a Brazilian person? But what this learner said, this is in fact a Brazilian woman, she said, I really like to have this control. I think it's really cool when you're aware of your accent. So she wanted to be able to switch it on and off. Yeah, okay, basically. So she wanted to actually have the ability where she could pass for being a native speaker, but then if she wanted to be in a situation where she wanted to make it clear to everyone that actually she is Brazilian, that she could, just put her Brazilian accent back on. Yeah. So she wanted the best of both worlds, and I think that's a nice thing. And then this, from another of the learners, it's trying to be not to be immediately recognised as a foreigner, but it's more important to have the right pronunciation than the right accent. Okay. So really, what this learner is sort of saying is that comprehensibility, that you're understood, is more important than having a New Zealand accent or a British accent or whatever. That is the key issue. And I would certainly agree with that. I asked teachers why they sort of, because I said, do you do much pronunciation with advanced level learners? And they said a bit, but not much. And this was kind of typical comment. We tend to do drills when we teach elementary at lower levels. So when it comes to teaching advanced learners, you're sort of like, oh, if I start drilling, they'll think it's weird. Yeah. But so because I actually did the teachers interview between the two interviews and I actually went back and said to the advanced learners, how would you feel about being drilled? in that way. So, you know, I did an example drill with them. And they said, fine, we like that. Yeah. Which I was surprised. I was genuinely surprised because I had tended to think this way. So this was kind of new information for me that that this pronunciation need was quite strong in these learners, and actually they're quite happy to do this kind of controlled drilling from time to time to try and sort out these things of stress and intonation. Yeah, which is interesting. Okay. Then I, with the learners in particular, I went on to look at, I wanted to look at materials, how they like to learn, okay? So out of their kind of needs, these three things emerged as specific language needs, all right? Okay. One was writing skills development that had a kind of a grammar focus, some kind of accuracy focus. One was pronunciation, that had come through very strongly, stress and intonation. And idioms had come through very strongly they really felt that they needed idioms. So these were very specific needs. So I was kind of interested in terms of how, what kinds of materials, what kind of resources they liked working with. So what I did, we had the first meeting where we talked about this, and I gave them some homework before the next meeting. And for each of those 3 language points, I gave them 2 bits of material. Okay, so they got a total of 6 bits of material. They didn't actually have to do the exercises. All I wanted them was to look at the bits of material. And for each, like for the writing, for the pronunciation, and also for the idioms, activity A meant that they would just manipulate sentence level examples. Okay. In terms of looking at that particular language point. In activity B for each one, they would focus on a language point that was embedded in a broader context. Okay, so here, just sentence level examples. Here, examples where it was in a broader context, or something like a listening text, a reading text, where they had other language around the idioms or the pronunciation and stress, etc. And they were the kind of material, they were a mixture of self-study and classroom-based materials, okay? So I sent them home and said, you don't have to do these exercises, I just want you to look at them and decide for each one, do you prefer the A activity or the B activity, okay? And this is what they had to say. Or what do you think they had to say, A or B? You reckon B? Yeah. B? Okay, you're right. Okay. So what they said, why B? They said because it's closer to reality. You can hear them when a native speaker uses them. So, like particularly if it's a listening, you know, when you're looking at pronunciation. I prefer exercise B, especially this reading part for writing. When we write something, I say we have to borrow some vocabulary or collocation. So it's this idea that having a context, having not just sentence level examples, but a whole text, meant that they could actually get language from that. Maybe the language that the material was focusing on, but there could be extra bits of language that they could use. So that they felt that having a context gave them a richer language environment with which to work and actually get language from. So that was quite reassuring to see. Now, here's some good news for us. They all said, I think all of them should be done with a teacher. It's too confusing to do it by your own, or on your own. Okay? And then another one said, I really had to imagine, because just looking at this, it's a bit boring. But then I think, we do this kind of exercise in class, and I like it. Okay? So this is great news for us. Because basically, and you know, this really is our job, is to take, you know, materials and actually make them come to life in the classroom. And they were unanimous in saying that that is much better than trying to work it out on your own. So it means, you know, we're still good for a job. Yeah. So that was kind of heartening to find out that they wanted contextualized language, but they wanted to work on it when it was mediated by a teacher. Okay. Self-study, I also asked them to think about how they like studying. So listening to fluent or native speakers, reading, watching TV and movies, keeping a vocabulary notebook, target language practice. Okay. So these are all potential ways of studying on their own when they're working on those language points. Which one do you think they did not choose? They chose all of them except one. 5? 4. 4. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They thought that was boring, basically. Well, they just said we don't do it. And I mean, it just made me think of all the years I've spent trying to encourage learners to keep a vocabulary notebook, and it's kind of like, actually, we don't care. I was kind of interested in this because basically because they you know, the kind of grammar and vocabulary need, wanting language, and I just sort of said, well, if you're just going to be listening to fluent speakers, are you actually going to be learning language? Because it kind of felt a bit passive in a way. And this was really interesting because they often said that what they do is when they're listening to very fluent speakers of English, they're listening for language a lot of the time. Because I thought they just sort of, just kind of general listening practice, but they're actually passing language. And this is a lovely comment. This is from the Korean student. She said, yesterday my friend told me he's a little bit under the weather. So the friend is a native speaker. So this learner actually had a child at primary school, and she was talking to her friend. They were waiting for their children at primary school. And she said, first I think, what weather? So I got a dictionary and I went, which I think is really nice. So she's kind of actively listening for idioms. Yeah, under the weather, what's that? And she went away and checked, and she will remember that. So that was really interesting, and it showed how these advanced learners can do this. Okay. So desire for language. Do advanced learners know it all? No, they don't. And I think really what came through was discussions revealed a real desire for language input. Okay, so learners want a lot of language input, and they also want to focus a lot on style and register. So when you go online, I'm going to cut to the chase here because we're running out of time, but when you go online and you look at, there's lots of websites which give you ideas for working with advanced learners. And a lot of them mention, do projects with them, do reading groups, they keep journals or blogs, they do word or grammar search projects. Learners teach a language lesson to each other, video projects. So a lot of the ideas for advanced learners online are very kind of project task-based. Have you done searches like this? Yeah. And the results often, I'm putting a few together, but this is what comes up. And I asked the learners about this, the strong task-based learner-centered focus in terms of ideas for lessons, and they pretty much poo-pooed it. They thought they didn't agree at all. And one learner says, I wouldn't be able to do a task with anyone else about writing. I get much confused. I would get confused by myself. So having to do it in a group, I'll just get even more confused. One said, if you do 2 hours of just speaking, I think it's not really good because you just can actually talk to each other after school. Yeah, okay. So this idea of actually, going to do a 2-hour lesson, which is very task-based, where you're communicating with other learners for 2 hours, they felt was pretty much a waste of time. And this is where they look at what they like to do in having learners in focus. I think in France, if we do a lot of exercise in a small group, I think it's helpful. It depends on what the aim of the activity is. And if you don't have proper feedback and just speak, you need feedback, or else what's the point of having a class? Yeah. And this is very much where I think that as teachers, I think this is a useful message for us, that what advanced learners, they want to focus on language, they want to have a go, but they want our feedback. Yeah, they want to know, are they getting it right, are they getting it wrong, is it appropriate, is it not, is that how we use it? So they've got a unanimous preference for feedback from a teacher. So you can't do too much feedback on learner language with advanced learners, or certainly with this group. I don't know if that resonates with advanced learners that you know, but you know, the more feedback you give them on the language, it seems the happier they are. And this ties in with a learning-oriented approach to methodology, this idea of where you are kind of listening for learner language and giving them feedback on it as a way of determining what their future needs are. So the assessment here is just classroom-based evaluation. It's not having tests. It's just the teacher wandering around listening to learner language and evaluating, okay, you did this well, you need to work on this, etc. So broadly speaking, it means the assessment is oriented towards learning, but the assessment is not formal. It's just us listening, basically, our personal evaluation as we're conducting the lesson. Okay, and yeah, often it's, you know, we give a task, we observe, we interpret how it's going, we make a decision on what we're going to do, we give feedback to learners, and then that modify our objectives. That's a typical task cycle. By the way, I'm going to leave, this is on the desktop, so I'm going to leave it here if you want sort of copies of stuff, so that the copy will be here. So the key points that I want to make is the importance of pronunciation. They still want pronunciation in advanced, and that was a surprise for me, because I to be honest, prior to doing this, I have not typically dealt a lot with pronunciation at advanced level. The degree to which they were hungry for language, and the value that they give to a teacher's mediation in the learning process. They really want to be taught, and they want feedback. They want us to teach, and they want us to give feedback. And I think that the whole thing was worthwhile to find all that out, to kind of validate that. The interesting thing is I actually did this after I'd written Empower Advanced. Ideally, I would have done it before. But I was kind of heartened in a way, because a lot of the issues they raised, I'd actually we've dealt with in Empower. And, I mean, there is pronunciation there. There is lots of opportunities for learners to practice language. There's a strong focus on language and challenging language. But obviously, it's up to teachers to get that off the page and make it really, really happen. So some caveats, my sample group. So, you know, you can't generalize too much. Okay, from what I'm saying, because it was a very small sample group. They were studying in an English-speaking country, so that's going to change things. And I was extremely lucky. The 5 students that I found were very articulate. I mean, they were very cooperative as well. I gave them chocolates at the end to say thanks. And they were very self-aware, so it was really, really interesting. And they said that they'd enjoyed sort of talking about these issues together. There is one thing that we can generalize from the study, and that is the idea, particularly with advanced level learners, how important needs analysis is. Okay, because in a way, my case study was a sort of a sophisticated needs analysis. It's really not much more than that. But if you are teaching advanced level learners, you know, give them a questionnaire to find out about their needs. This is kind of what I would suggest as a methodology for doing needs analysis with advanced level learners. Give them to what Pauline did, the teacher who administered the initial questionnaire. Rather than just giving them a questionnaire to fill out, she actually gave them more than an hour or so to actually talk about it together. Okay, because it allowed her to kind of clarify things. They clarified things with each other. And the interesting thing, by discussing it together, they didn't all write the same answers. Okay, that discussion process was a process of clarifying their own thoughts. And they actually wrote very, very different things. The next bit is to analyze the information and try to look for patterns and try to keep an open mind. Okay, and then do a follow-up discussion in which you know, if you've noticed some themes and things like that, go back to the learners. What do you mean by this? What can we do? So, so really, this is kind of what I learned, probably more than anything else by doing this case study, is that at advanced level, as we noted right at the beginning of the session, they have a jagged profile. Their needs are quite varied. So each advanced level learner group that you'll get is always going to be a little bit different, I suspect. So doing a thorough needs analysis at the beginning of the course is a really good idea. Okay, that's it. So that's the story I have to tell about what goes on in New Zealand. I hope it's of some interest and some value of what you guys have to do here in Spain. And thank you very much for listening, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.